This is the College Football Connection Podcast with Alvin, Reid, Bradford, Bruns, and Marty Jenkins on 101 ESPN.
Turnover aplenty in the top 10 alone, and a turning of the page potentially in Gainesville. What's up, everybody? Bradford, Bruns, and Alvin, Reid, your boys, back with you for part 1 of 2 this week in our studio space here in Creve Coeur. It's the College Football Connection overtime presentation after week number 8. And Alvin, yet again, as we meet on 101 ESPN, that YouTube channel, and 101ESPN.com, topsy-turvy results all the way around, and basically you blink and you have before you a brand new top 5, top 10 constitution, my friend.
Absolutely, man. It's so many close games, and so many games you don't know what's going to happen with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
You know, you're halfway through the fourth quarter. I couldn't tell you who's going to win this game.
Not at all.
So, you know, what we're doing here, not making excuses, but prognostication is a little tougher these days because there just aren't very many just flat-out gimmies.
Lots.
And I
Where
think
did they
that's
go?
cool, you know, but man, between the overtimes, a play here, a play there, you know, like I say, sometimes you say, well, Ole Miss is going to Ole Miss, and then they did, but at the same time, they controlled that game. So it was a fun weekend, you know, and we'll see where it goes the rest of the way.
And hey, parody is the catch-all term, right?
Yeah,
that we
think
like
so.
to use to
Right.
encapsulate
And
all of this.
And it's parody, but also the whole $20 million hasn't really even kicked in yet. I think at some point, maybe more and more schools will get to that $20 million NIL limit. What will their rosters look like then? We are not all the way there. Obviously, you got South Florida's and teams like this that aren't going to come near $20 million, but yet they're very competitive. You got a team like Tennessee who is probably could get there if they're not there already. Their best win of the season is over Mississippi State.
True.
You know, and you start thinking, well, Tennessee's pretty good. And it's like, then you think, well, who would Tennessee be?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
What about that body of work?
Right, exactly. So I'm sure there are a lot of teams out there saying, like, you know, I'd love to play them. We have to go there. Maybe we could play them at home, but I'd love to play them. I think coming into scheduling is going to change, or maybe not change, but I think a lot of these schools will be wanting to say, like, hey, yes, we will, South Florida, some of these other ones, yes, we'll play you at your home first 3 weeks of the season because we get paid, and we think we get paid. Beat you. We know, seriously.
That's
and
for both worlds.
Right, and I think some of these bigger schools are going to have tougher times finding these Ducks to play, not Oregon, but in the first 3 weeks of the season.
Sure.
I mean, UMass's phone is probably like just jumping off the hook. People offering them games, you know, for the next 5-6 years. Because like, who's out there that we know we can beat in a game of football and won't get embarrassed?
The Mizzou series is over. Go for it. Go for it.
Somebody else can have them, right?
For me, though, the fact remains, Alvin, OSU is the only team in the entire country at this juncture, at this stage, as we move deeper into October, in which I have unwavering confidence. Followed closely, yes, admittedly by Indiana for that matter. But as we really take stock here and what we're going to do in this installment of the program, basically, we're taking inventory on the heels of week number 8. Okay, yesterday, the latest AP Top 25 poll, at which we had hinted off of the very top. Of course, it was released, and of course, 4 top 10 squads over the weekend, last weekend alone, Alvin, went down. And that's not the first time. That's not an anomaly here. It's actually the third such occasion that we have witnessed so far in 2025. What makes this more interesting to me, though, and intriguing after the weekend that was, after the bloodshed, basically, that spilled there. 9 top 25 teams overall lost, and that hasn't happened since back in 2022. So some of the most interesting takeaways to me, the signature victories per se. You could go in a lot of different directions here. You can talk about the ascent, obviously, of a team like Vandy, and now ranked in the top 10. We'll talk much more later in the week, the Mizzou Vanderbilt head-to-head preview on the College Football Connection. But for the first time since 47, you're in the top 10. You're 6-1 for the first time since 1950. So you came off of that bye. You came off of the disappointment against Alabama, which could have really crippled your campaign if you had allowed it to do as much. If you basically went down the same path that you followed one season ago, having lost 4 of the last 5 conference games down the stretch. But we saw the exact opposite. We saw the opposite reaction, and that was just one of a few different statement games. We're talking about Louisville. We're talking about Notre Dame being able to cover in that versus USC. So what was the biggest thing that stood out to you, maybe in that realm or somewhere else even?
I think Miami losing. I thought Miami was a legitimate number 2 that would beat Louisville. I'm sorry. I would have gotten that wrong if we had picked that game. You can't lose at home to an unranked team, and they plummeted in the standings, maybe a little bit more than they should have.
You think so, though?
But what do you do with the teams that won, and what do you do with the teams that also lost within the top 10?
Yeah,
I still think the SEC gets a little bit too much play. As far as we get these preseason rankings, then we beat the teams we're supposed to, and then lose to the teams we're supposed to. What keeps you in the top 15? I don't know.
10 teams in the top 25 at last check again.
Right. And I think there are not a lot of teams that are in the lower 20s that are making statements other than South Florida, but you got whipped by Miami, and now all of a sudden that win doesn't look as good, but Miami just dropped the ball. That was a signature loss as much as the signature wins. I thought Ohio State would have a little bit more trouble with Wisconsin than they did, but Wisconsin is god-awful. I've come to that conclusion.
Is Wisconsin ever going to score again?
That's what I mean.
Ever. Right? But today, the pronouncement, the declaration comes out, the dreaded vote of confidence. We'll get into coaching stuff in a minute. Luke Fickell, good luck with that.
No, I think Luke Fickell is either moving on by choice or by force. How are you going to recruit? How are you going to do these other things? Right. But anyway, Ohio State, legitimate number 1. Alabama won the game, okay? And that's all Alabama could do is win games. Georgia, faced with possibly falling out of the top 10, had to come back in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss with a chance to be a solid, 3 or 4 in the nation?
For sure.
Punch the game away, not literally punch, but just doesn't do anything.
Outscored 17-0 in the fourth quarter.
In the fourth quarter. And you were right. I got a 9-point lead. I got the ball at the beginning of the fourth quarter.
Game over.
Game over. Like,
should be. I don't care
I'd go over there and tell Kirby Smart, like, Kirby, we were ripping and running. We had the ball 5 times, scored 5 touchdowns.
You can't stop us.
You can't stop us. And if we don't score a touchdown right now, we're going to be up by 12 points because we're getting a field goal.
So how do you explain that win away down the stretch? That's the thing, because after really a back-and-forth first half, because Georgia got its numbers offensively, too. Credit to Gunnar Stockton, not just with the feet. That has been the biggest quandary I've had with his play this season. Okay, you've got the mobility, you're doing things outside of the pocket, but show me something down the field. He did, and then finally the physicality reared its head just a tad for the Bulldogs. I'm still suspicious about that unit, but in the fourth quarter we saw this sea change, and it was just unfathomable.
And I think that Ole Miss wasn't thinking about winning. They weren't thinking about losing. They were thinking about playing until the fourth quarter. Then they started thinking. And that was, you could just tell that the gears were grinding a little too hard. And so I think they basically psyched themselves out in that game. I really do. I'll give Missouri credit because they didn't do that. And I thought Missouri, like I said, I took Auburn. I said, okay, 1.5. I think Auburn wins that game. And, you end up in overtime. But when they were tied and then Missouri kept getting stopped, that was when I was saying, like, you don't want to give Auburn the ball with 8 minutes left. You don't want to give Auburn the ball back with whatever. Then Missouri had the ball and went backwards at the end of the game. And like, they flirted with disaster, but the defense really stood up.
It did.
It really did. And then, then Auburn's offense was non-existent at the end of the game in the overtime.
Who could have guessed?
Who could have guessed?
Who could have guessed that?
But after Missouri missed the field goal, and you're like, that was when I was thinking, like, Auburn's going to score a touchdown here. Missouri's going to have to score a touchdown. And they still couldn't do anything. So then I knew that, well, you know how that is, how momentum, it shifts, the pendulum. I went from, I really think Auburn's going to win, to I know Missouri's going to win. So you had 2 chances, Auburn, and you didn't make good on either one of them. I nope, home game or not.
And quite frankly, down the stretch of what did turn out to be a 23-17 triumph for Mizzou, second consecutive year you win a nip and tuck affair against Auburn. Hey, those two dueling Tigers, they've gone back and forth both at Como in 2024 and this particular year in the Plains. I had a lot of reservations because of the special teams gaffes that you knew you were getting, that you have been privy to during the course of this season for Mizzou. Now, obviously, Robert Meyer, he didn't get out of that game unscathed. But if you think about Alvin down the stretch and the way in which that contest progressed, after the first drive, Auburn did that exact thing against Georgia a week prior.
Right.
And then subsequently, okay, maybe you're amassing the yardage. Maybe even you see a clutch throw here and there from Jackson Arnold. But as far as effectiveness when venturing into the red zone, constantly having to settle, and then when you in your own right don't have a reliable place kicker too, Alex McPherson, at a certain point, you almost felt for the young man.
Right.
3 missed field goals in the entirety of that game. And let's talk a little about the overtime portion of that contest, and that will segue into the fate, or at least the current status, murky as it may be, of one Hugh Freeze. Missouri absolutely made that stand the climactic drive for Auburn's second overtime, okay?
Right.
Being able to pull out the victory. The pressure came from up front. It came from the guy who's been leading the charge all season. He did the talking prior to the coin toss, and then he came through in Zion Young, all right? He was the guy. He was the foremost motor. But Bo Perbula, he definitely absorbed his fair share of slings and arrows in recent weeks. The numbers weren't especially pretty on the page once again. You watch the game tape, and you weren't left wowed whatsoever. 2 picks for the second consecutive contest, although that final one, last few seconds of the fourth quarter, you're trying to make something happen.
Yeah, that
it's
was
starting forever.
Right.
That's excusable.
And he knew it. That's what I'm saying. When they had gone
Yeah.
backwards, and then they just said, like, let's try to pull a rabbit out of our hat.
You can explain that one away. But when you needed that climactic score on the ground from 3 yards out, every single yard, especially on the ground, Alvin, it was hard by which to come. Credit the Auburn run defense in particular, because I did not laud that enough going into this game. Ahmad Hardy, it wasn't for lack of touches here. He had 20-plus carries, but he was only able to get close to that 60-yardage mark because Auburn really is that sterling up front defensively. But now here you are at the end of the evening, and I'm sure a lot of people, they're in the state of Alabama. They were thinking, are we going to get the bloody news the following morning? Well, it didn't happen in Auburn. It wasn't like Happy Valley the previous weekend. It wasn't even like Gainesville, and we'll get to Gainesville, the Swamp, in just a minute here on the CFC. But the fact of the matter is that Hugh Freeze's team this year in 2025 now falls to 3-4. 4-game losing streak. And this is the biggest, most damning bit of information I think we can pass along. He is 5-15 in league play so far in the Plains. Alvin, he has a losing record at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yes.
You cannot abide by this for much longer. You simply can't. When is the other shoe going to fall or drop?
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the season.
He'll make it that far?
I think he'll make it that far, because if they didn't fire him this week, what's the point? I don't. You fire him before the Alabama game, which is, it's not the last week of this. I don't think it's the last week of the regular season anymore. But I mean, if they got blew out 50-10 or something like that, then you let him go. I just think that he'll probably ride it out the rest of the season. Then he's gone. Not sure what his buyout is, but I'm sure it's, up there. So, I mean, there's some coaches that are hanging on right now who I think will get fired. I think 9 coaches have been dismissed. Now, you owe James Franklin $50 million, so this is about a third of the number I'm going to say here.
He's already on tour, by the way.
Yeah,
I know you saw that.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, he came out of his shell, right. But it's the total of the buyouts of the 9 coaches that have already been fired is over $160 million.
That's astounding, but also not surprising.
And you know what else? A lot of offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators have buyouts.
True.
And it's through no fault of their own. Let's just say, at Auburn, whose defense don't suck.
No.
Okay? And the guy's making $1.5, $2 million, $3 million, something like that.
Good chunk.
All right. He's going to lose his job because the head coach got fired. Sorry, Charlie. But at the same time, he said, well, I'm going to take $2 million with me. And my defense was pretty good. So I know I can get hired as a coordinator. Mm-hmm. I know if I want to step down to, maybe a lesser Power 4 team, or below that, I can be a head coach. maybe make the exact same amount of money that I was making at Florida State, or I've said Florida State, but wherever I'm at.
For sure.
So I think people forget whole staffs get the heave-ho, and some of those have buyouts too. So that may be another reason why, man, if I owe this guy, if I owe Alvin $2 million a year, how about we keep the whole thing together, and that way I could swallow it a little bit better at the end of the season, knowing that I owe Alvin, the defensive coordinator, $1.5 million because he did coach the rest of the season.
You didn't tell me there would be math, but I like where you're going with this one. Keep going.
Yeah, and in these huge big money programs, I think people, boosters or whatever, are writing these checks because James Franklin is not going to get $50 million from the Penn State athletic department. I mean, they may have a lot of money, but let's be serious. If it's $20 million, your cap on NIL to players, you don't have enough to pay a coach $50 million. You just don't. So that money's coming from elsewhere.
For sure.
And it's coming from people that you just got to go. We want you gone. We'll pay you.
Yeah, let's talk the finances. Let's talk about sums in that neighborhood of $20 million, $21 million, because while Hugh Freeze may not yet be on the chopping block, one of his peers, at least as of a few days ago in the SEC, most definitely met his demise after that Saturday game. Hey, Florida, Alvin, actually was able to win, albeit barely. 23-21 over Mississippi State, thanks to a last-second, quite literally, interception by a defensive tackle. But the AD said, nah, that's not good enough. I've seen enough, and therefore, the Billy Napier era has finally come to a conclusion. We have talked about this, Alvin, it seems, for the last year plus. And at seemingly each and every turn when it appeared as if that would finally be, it would be that bit of finality. The program figured out ways to be able to extend and basically bypass the inevitable. Not this time around. I wondered, and I openly said as much on 101 ESPN prior to the Texas game, back on October the 4th, if I'm not mistaken. Should Florida lose this game, that's it for Napier. Now, what do you do in the swamp? Again, a last-ditch effort, and Florida rises off of the mat, off of the canvas temporarily, picks up the victory versus the Longhorns. But finally, you have seen enough, and you've seen enough from a coach who ends his tenure in Gainesville with a 22-23 record and 12-16 in league play. Sounds eerily similar and familiar to Hugh Freeze, right? And 0-14 against ranked foes away from home. Florida now is on the hook for not only $21 million in buyout terms, half of which, mind you, has to be contributed and forwarded along over the course of the next 30 days. Then you get 3 tidy annual installments. Happy summer for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Yet you are also, while you're trying to find, pinpoint, and locate the next successor, the next guy to lead you, presumably, you hope, to prominence, you're still paying Dan Mullen from way back when. Where does this program, where does the athletic director, Scott Strickland, go? Because you have all of this talent that you have amassed on this roster. How are you going to keep a lot of that talent at bay? Don't really know if you can in this climate. And where do you go from here?
Well, it depends, obviously, on who you can find to coach Florida. Now, there are a lot of coaches out there that would love to coach Florida. Could come down there and say, like, listen, instead of trying to, win the SEC and the national championship, first thing I'm going to do is win games. Because this other guy was 22-23. And what is really, shows off on that record, when you look at his league record, that leaves a lot of losses, which means, like, man, anybody was coming down here and beating you. Who can we remember, by name, going down and beating Florida in Florida? Notre Dame didn't play down there. We're talking about, like, non-conference games. Who's the great? Penn State, Notre Dame, USC, Penn State, Notre Dame, whoever else. I don't recall them playing at Florida.
Correct.
So who the hell was beating Florida in these games?
The also rings.
I think there you go. I think that would, it's one thing to lose to Alabama, but oh my Lord.
And see, with all due respect, you kind of recruited Billy Napier in the first place, not from no man's land, but instead of making that splash hire with the name, you thought you had identified a guy who had had a lot of success at Louisiana. He was a culture builder,
yes,
right? And you had already paid X amount to the guys essentially post-Spurrier era, okay? And you were trying to make a hire based on acumen and fit. It failed spectacularly. So now, do you go back to the sizzle, to the aura, to the magnetism, or somewhere in between? Because I do think you're caught in limbo right now, and you can't worry about whether you're going to retain somebody like a DJ Lagway, whether you can actually hold on to somebody like a Dallas Wilson. You've got to get somebody with presence, and yes, with charisma, with magnetism, but by the same token, your X's and O's guys, oh, by the way, the one who wouldn't relinquish play-calling duties, I think that's one of the biggest reasons right now as to why he's looking for his next job.
I agree with you. And I was going to say, I think maybe to keep those that you have, you're going to have to hire an offensive coach, an offensive guru. I understand program builder. I understand all that, which kind of played out as to why he was able to hold his job, because right when they were at, death's door, so to speak, would they run off 4 straight wins and
last year
barely lost to, I forgot who it was, but they were pretty impressive, 4-1. They rose up for the coach, and I think that's why they came into the beginning of this year with some confidence. And, it fell apart once again. But, you can't lose to South Florida. Now, Miami who thumped South Florida, then lost, like we said, to Louisville. But that South Florida loss probably irritated a lot of people. So we can't let these directional schools come in here and beat us. We're Florida. No. Now, Florida hadn't been Florida as far as national championship consideration for what now? 6-7 years?
At least.
At least.
I said Spurrier. Let's go back to Meyer, then fast forward just a few years, because post-Meyer, say what you will about the character, about the temperament, all those things, they are fair to question. Since then, have you really felt well about a McElwain? Have you felt well about a Mullen? No. 1,000 times.
That's exactly it. Florida's been nowhere a long time now. And I think that's one reason they said, all right, we're going to hit the refresh button, because that's all we can do. Look, find some $3 million coach out there that can coach, and just keep trotting them through until one of them finds success.
Because you're paying enough in archival sense.
And you could come out. If I was the athletic director, I'd probably say, hey, I'd ask the governor. Well, I don't really care for the governor, but anyway, I'd ask the governor.
We digress.
Hey, come to the press conference with me, okay? Because I'm going to tell the people that until we get some of this buyout, I don't care. Right now, I'm not strapping the state or the boosters or anybody else for all this money after this. I'm not hiring another guy that's going to come in here wanting $7-8 million. We don't know if he can coach or not. Mm-hmm. I'm going to find some young upstart, pay him like 3.5. If we make it to a major bowl game, I'll give him a $3.5 million bonus. I'll write the check. But we're wasting money, and we should feel bad about it. I seriously would have that, conversation.
You're just burning it, right?
We're just burning money. That's not, you shouldn't teach your students, your players, your academic staff. These are not examples that people don't notice. Oh, we're a serious university. There's no money. I need new test tubes. We ain't got new test tube money. Right. Right, we don't have that. Well, no. But we're paying some dude not to coach. We wrote him a check for $20 million.
Multiple guys not to
Multiple
coach.
Yeah.
Over a decade plus, basically. Now, I don't necessarily know if a press conference is going to follow for somebody else in the SEC. But as we continue to basically spin that coaching carousel here on College Football Connection, overtime special for you on 101ESPN.com and that YouTube channel, Alvin, it doesn't look particularly good in the other Columbia, namely South Carolina, for one Shane Beamer either. Now, 32 and 26 overall, having spent a lot of time there now over the past few seasons following Saturday's absolutely embarrassing display, at home, mind you, against Oklahoma. It was 26-7. I was there in the studio over on 101 ESPN. It wasn't even remotely that close. You basically were boat raced. You were physically manhandled at the point of attack, both sides of the football. Lenora Sellers looks like a shell of what he was a year ago.
I wonder if he's hurt. I still wonder if he's hurt.
Has to be, because ever since, I would say, though, even before, in fairness, before he sustained the concussion against Vanderbilt, he wasn't taking off with the same reckless abandon. To his credit, I guess, you hope that as you mature, as your game evolves, you're picking and choosing your spots. But for somebody who hasn't been able to progress purely, distinctly in the area as a passer in his second full season on campus, It's just a mess. You have a track star as your one vertical threat, but he's still clearly learning the game of football.
Right.
You have no ground game of which to speak. And we all knew that going into this season, Shane Beamer and company, everybody down there would be hitching their respective wagons to Sellers. This program would ascend, would go as far as he could carry it. I fell victim to that very line of thinking, that line of thought. But number 13, entering the season in the polls for good reason, you thought.
Right.
I don't know if it has necessarily gotten stale. I do know that this is a non-competitive team. And oh, by the way, you're welcoming Alabama at home in a matter of days. And your fans essentially, through the halfway point, Alvin, of that first quarter against the Sooners, they were already booing. The catcalls were coming out. It was a wave. It was a crescendo of displeasure. They are hating it right now.
And Beamer said he loves it there, and don't read anything into the fact that Virginia Tech doesn't have a coach.
There it is.
And I'm like, well, I'm Virginia Tech. I'm kind of like maybe a fan or whatever. I said, like, granted, we all know who the old man was, but what has he done that we should hire him to come down here and resurrect our program?
Except for last season, they've been mediocre.
Right.
The numbers tell the story.
Right. So I'm kind of like, I don't know. Do you want to go in that direction? And all right. My man at Nebraska, I think he's going to go to Penn State. Okay. I don't know that, but I think he's going to go to Penn State.
Was he thinking about Penn State during that Minnesota verdict? Heavens to Betsy. What was that?
What was that about? Right. First, how did you give up that many points to Minnesota?
Friday night fiasco.
Right, exactly.
Please, that wasn't Max at QB.
Right.
Give me a break
and
here.
you just got to think to yourself, like, man, did the players, like, are they wondering, like, he ain't even going to be the coach next year? Right. They'll probably double his salary, go to Penn State, you know, than what he's getting at Nebraska.
With ease, I'd say.
Right, exactly. And he's kind of got Nebraska maybe back to level ground, but no, but they're not that. That loss, I think he's going to take that job. All right, I got one for you. So Lane Kiffin loses that game to Georgia. This would have been an easier thing to see if they had hung on and beat Georgia.
Okay, I see where you're going here.
Would you leave Ole Miss and go to Florida?
You know, I just read a number of pieces this morning about how Lane Kiffin, far and away, no Eli Drinkwitz, you're there at number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Lane is the obvious choice, the go-to guy to fill that void in the swamp. I don't know whether I'm buying at this point in time the character restoration, okay, the narrative that's being put out there. Hey, he has stability and then some in Oxford. Good for him in his personal life, if indeed that is the case.
Yeah.
But I'm also left with, would it be a fantastic splash as far as execution and, oh yeah, the magnetism, which I've mentioned several times to boot? Sure. Basically, you are serving the best of both worlds in that regard. But if you're talking about trying to get to the most grandiose, grand level once again as a program at Florida, I don't know if you are fully investing X amount in a guy that's still at Ole Miss, mind you, with the result that we just saw last Saturday night. He still, Alvin, doesn't have a road win, that is, against a top 10 team during his time at Ole Miss. Is he also somebody who maxes out at a certain level and isn't able to go just beyond? Is he more of that floor or ceiling raiser? I think it's still to be determined as a head coach.
Now, I would say this. The reason that it could possibly work at Florida for him is, let's say Ole Miss is 11-11, your offense, your defense, 22. Let's say I got 10, 12 more for real players. So let's say I'm really 35 deep at Ole Miss.
Okay.
Before we start putting guys out there that, you know, are good, but suspect maybe. Maybe that's 50. Maybe that's 45 or 50 at Florida. And maybe if I'm a coach, maybe I said, like, man, if I had 10 more dudes, okay, that was for real. Few on defense, few on offense. Maybe my, you know, count a special team, kick returner in that, you know, that I don't have at Ole Miss. Maybe that's enough that I said, like, yeah, I could be a perennial top 10 team if I had that roster, as opposed to we're doing fine at Ole Miss, but if I had just a few more players, I could do better. I don't know that. I really don't know that. So, but that's kind of a, man, you'd be staying in the SEC, you know the competition. I don't think people hate each other as much anymore if you leave a job and still be in the same, you know, conference. You know, like, you know, I why am I drawing a blank on Nebraska's coach's name? Came from UCF. I can't think of his name.
Coach Rule? Not right now?
Matt Rule.
Yeah.
Matt Rule. Okay, I'm sorry, God, for Baylor. I just was drawing a blank.
Hey, there are a lot of things regarding Lane running through the mind. I
Yeah,
get it. He's everywhere.
right.
He's out there on socials before kickoff. You know?
Oh, yeah. So Matt Rule, I don't think he would not go to Penn State because he had to play Nebraska every other year.
Right.
You know, them days is over.
It's a forgiving climate.
It's a
more
forgiving. That's what
climate.
I mean. So same thing with, they'll boo him, but I mean, I think Ole Miss fans would say, like, let's be honest here. He did about as much as you could do with the talent that we have at Ole Miss.
Has he maxed out there?
He may have maxed out there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's a fascinating conversation. It is enticing because he gives you so many different attributes. I don't know how much more room for growth there is. However, just to play devil's advocate here, and we've talked about trying to restore that sense of legitimacy on the playing surface to and for Florida. Do you run the risk? There's the temptation. It's a strong one at that. But do you run the risk of becoming branded more as the Lane Kiffin show as opposed to that absolute bastion of college football that was the Florida Gators?
No, I got you. But if he wins games and wins big games,
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It doesn't matter. I think, you know what? Our boy here, Drinkwitz, is a very verbose guy. Okay, I think he would work there. I really do. In fact, if Missouri, okay, and I'm going just a little hint for later in the week.
Say it with your chest.
I got confidence in Missouri. That's all I'm going to say.
All right.
Missouri runs this thing out. I think he leaves then because I think they'll make him an offer he just cannot refuse. Somebody's program is going to say, like, come here, come. You've proven enough. You've proven it to us. You guys lost one game or two games if they get into the playoff and then were to lose without winning the national championship.
3 straight 10-win or more seasons.
Right.
Does he get top 5 money? He can get top 5 money.
He can get top 5 money. He can recruit.
Because right now he's number 11 compensation-wise.
Yeah. He can get top 5 money. He can recruit. And when he gets them, he gets the most out of them, especially defensively. I'll give him that. Okay? And so I think if they really ran this thing through and got in the playoff, I think he would be – it would just be one of those things, Bradford, that like, honey, this is how much I make here. And I love it. It's been fun.
Columbia's great.
But my Lord.
You like the swamp?
But yeah, my Lord, they're offering me so much money. And the house we'll live in. And the perks we'll have. And all of that is just, it's kind of like, we pay for the condo in Miami in the off season because I'm Missouri's coach. They just gonna give it to me. Here's the keys, man.
And by the way, I'm still in the SEC
And
among the cream of the crop.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Once again, how deep are you really? Are you 30 deep? Are you 35 deep? And if you got 10, 12 more players deeper at Florida, I like how Drinkwitz coaches. I will say that Drinkwitz plays a lot of close games, and, you have a season, you go down there and you lose those games instead of win those games like he has at Missouri, and then everybody's going to say you can't coach. I think he's proven differently. So his name will get bantered about. I think it's just the right job. I mean, he ain't going to go to Colorado State, right? But
There's an opening.
Florida's one. I don't know that I would go to Auburn. I don't know, but Auburn's serious about football. I would consider it, okay? But you're always Alabama's stepchild down there. So no matter what you do. Florida State is getting it together, but those are worlds apart. I mean, I know that they call it the state rivalries, but between Florida State, Florida, and Miami, that's 3 different worlds. They clash sometimes, but it's not like, no, I would never get out of Florida State's shadow. Or when Miami's good, everybody cares about, well, no, nobody cares about Miami really except South Florida.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Now, they're really, really into Miami and South Florida. And your boy went from down there, right? He ain't going to get fired, but he went from king of all Miami to how do you lose that game? So, yeah, I can see Drinkwitz. I think Drinkwitz will be offered some jobs at the end of this year.
I agree.
The only game that I think he wouldn't be interested in would be Florida, unless somebody else gets the heave-ho. DeBoer's out of danger now. He was in danger. That'd be a job that I don't care. You never want to be the guy that replaces the guy.
The guy.
But I'd be the guy that replaced the guy that replaced the guy.
It is tantalizing. It is highly tantalizing, no doubt about it. Nothing wrong with a fair amount of speculation.
And I'm not trying to move your coach on Missouri. I'm not. But the way Missouri played against Auburn, the way they have played football, the way the coach has done what he's done with the talent he has at Missouri has impressed me. Now, who am I? But I thought Missouri would not ever, but I never look at Missouri as being the SEC champion. But all of a sudden, and I don't know what's going on, I'm not trying to take anything away from these other teams, but Missouri could have beat Alabama, and I came away out of that game saying Missouri could beat Alabama. Missouri could beat any team in the SEC. Who have you seen in the SEC that just looks like, oh my God, Missouri can't beat them?
Leaps and bounds better? No. There's nobody.
Nobody.
Right now.
Now, maybe that's the conference. Maybe that's the parity in the NIL. But I also think it's because Missouri's got a good coaching staff, and they're getting the most out of their players, and other coaches are not.
And we will see if that style of play, if the Mammoth success can carry over. Yes, going to Nashville on Saturday. Game day, it's finally on the scene for a Tigers game, albeit on the road. However, we cannot wait to preview that one. MU, Vandy, and a flurry of other top 25 matchups for you on the College Football Connection preview mode later in the week. Alvin, like a little OT here, we enjoy doing that once in a while as well, and we get to come to the people twice in the span of the week.
And usually you come to a season that big-name coaches, they'll at least last the season. Somebody's going to probably get fired after next week.
Yep.
So,
Check the phone.
Somebody's on the clock.
Like clockwork, right?
There you go.
Appreciate it, my man. For Alvin, Reid, for Marty Jenkins, my name is Bradford Bruns. Thank you so much, St. Louis. Enjoy the early portion of your week, and we will be back in preview mode shortly on 101 ESPN, that YouTube channel, and 101ESPN.com. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the College Football Connection podcast on 101 ESPN.